So you're listening to 94.4 FM, Salford City Radio Friday Sports Show. Your host, Jimmy Petruzzi, we news from Aguilera and around the world. A very fortunate show to interview some of the world's best athletes, sports people, coaches, sports psychs. Also, we have a segment featuring interviews with different people in the field of psychology and related fields who bring us interesting insights into their work. Today we have a really fascinating guest, a really interesting interview. We're going to sort of discuss burnout. UK Millennials head for burnout. There was a survey commissioned by Wrigley's Extra Gum by a OnePoll, and it suggested that more than 2/3 of millennials, those born between 1981 and 96, in case you're wondering, will have too many distractions and struggle to switch off each day and face burnout. Today's guest is going to give us an insight in social media star, corporate law, TED speaker, Henry Nelson Case. Welcome to the show. Great to have you on board.
Hey Jimmy, thank you for having me. Really happy to be here.
Yeah. So tell us a bit more about burnout in terms of what impact it's having on millennials.
Absolutely. So yeah, as you mentioned, the research that Extra Gum commissioned around sort of people's pace of life shows that the younger generations, that's sort of the millennials, Gen Z, are living life at a faster pace more than any other generation in history. The average age of someone experiencing burnout in their careers being 34. So it's really shocking just to see how many of us have experienced burnout and how young the sort of average age is.
And so, what are some of the what I know it's hard to identify one cause, but what are some of the reasons why? Is it sort of work demands? Is it social media? Is it a combination of all those things?
Yeah, I would say that one of the biggest reasons is that the research has found that people below the age of 34 have too many distractions to be able to switch off each day and struggle to focus, compared to just 12% of baby boomers. And if you factor into the current world events such as the cost of living crisis, heightening how sort of young Brits feel and overall sort of impacting them, with Gen Z being worried that they won't be able to pay their bills, being concerned that they won't be able to pay into their pensions, fearing that they'll sort of never be able to retire. So if you act this all together with this sort of faster pace of life, it can create this feeling of being overwhelmed.
And so, like, I know obviously everyone's sort of different, and different things affect different people in different ways. But what are some of the things that sort of some sort of tips that you could share with dealing with distractions and burnout?
Yeah, and I think one of the biggest things is to identify or try and identify what the cause of the source of your stress is. Is that work-related stress? Do I have too much work? Is there anything in my personal life that I need to focus on? Because once you kind of know what it is that you can causing you this level of kind of stress and feeling sort of overwhelmed, you can address it more effectively. Doing things like moving your body, exercising regularly, if that's going for a walk, sort of playing sports, getting out and about. This can make us feel good, and doing stuff like this will again allow us to take that time to slow down, focus on ourselves, and not pick up our phones for the most part, and avoid being distracted.
Yeah, and what about, say, for example, what are your thoughts on possibly, having days where there's no phone or no technology, or maybe a cut-off point during the day where some downtime?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure how I would survive without my phone for a whole day, but there are sort of ways that you can reduce your screen time by taking these moments for yourselves. If you're going on a walk, you can listen to a podcast, chew some gum, do something that sort of distracts your brain from thinking about those emails, from thinking about that next meeting that I've got coming up, that message I need to respond to. So it's about doing something for you that allows you to kind of switch off and take that moment for yourself.
What's interesting as well, like in the research, like reading for some of this research, and it suggested that, say, a much lower percentage of, say, Generation X, say people born between 65 and 1980, would check the emails before starting time. I mean, I know it's difficult to sort of say why there's a difference. I'm sure, the millennials grew up probably with technology. I mean, what are your thoughts in terms of why is that the case? Why do we have a generation that sort of struggles to sort of, I'd say struggle, but they feel the need to sort of check their emails before like starting time, or they're sort of like more likely to sort of check and the emails or other social media as well, where they might get messages.
Yeah, that's really interesting, and one of the things is that we now have all of this technology, which, whilst for the most part has been great in terms of it's given us access to new ways of working, connectivity with people sort of around the world, it also does have its negative sides, and the research shows very clearly that the stresses and strains of modern day life, such as long working hours, growing reliance on these smartphones, our emails, being able to order fast food through apps, being able to just like text really quickly, means that we've almost kind of forgotten how to slow down, and we are living in this constant rush, switching between apps, sending emails, getting the sort of red pings to say we've got a new notification. And it's not sustainable for the most part, because then we're not getting enough sleep, we're being overly stressed with our work, we're not having enough time to relax, and this can really negatively impact us. So we do need to be able to take those steps back and allow more time for ourselves to wind down and enjoy doing something for us.
Yeah, I'm guessing then as well too that there becomes like an over dependency on technology too, which is going to be a barrier as well. So that sort of over dependency on technology, but also I suppose, like I'm sure that sort of looking at a screen for long periods of time isn't great as well. Is there sort of anything in the research that suggests that there might become this sort of dependency on tech?
I wouldn't say there's anything that I've seen. I'm sure there is research out there that talks about our over-reliance on technology, but I think one of the key messages is that we don't, like, the research that has been commissioned that we're talking about specifically is that this current generation, Gen Z millennials, are more likely to check their phones first thing in the morning. They can't relax until the sort of inboxes are cleared, so it's there is this need to be on this technology and our reliance on our smartphones, but putting them down and doing something for ourselves, putting in those boundaries around when I'm going to work, when I'm not going to work, when the laptop's off, that's work out of my head, I'm going to go and do something for me now, whatever that may be, to kind of switch off, to decompress, and to kind of enjoy a slower pace of life whilst I've got the opportunity to.
It's really interesting, and sort of anecdotally, my own experience, I'm sort of thinking that, in work and other areas where, I mean, I can sort of see that like pattern really where, you might get an email prior to starting like the working day, or even outside of working hours. And sometimes there's also like almost like an expected reply. I sort of decided a long time ago there are certain hours that I work, and outside those hours, it's just there's not a great deal I can do to reply. You need time, you need to unwind, you want to go into work really, really fresh and focused. And I suppose what I'm getting at, I know the scope of the research probably doesn't cover that, but I'm wondering why that's the sort of case. I mean, there's almost like seems to be like an anxiety in terms of like, I obviously can't speak for everybody, but is there any sort of like research that anything in the scope of this research that sort of looks to understand why there's that sort of need to sort of get on the email prior to sort of starting work or outside maybe hours?
Not within this specific sort of data set that's been carried out by sort of Extra Gum, but I'm sure there is research out there in terms of smartphone addictions, anxieties, and checking emails before. But like you, Jimmy, I'm completely guilty of doing exactly the same. I will wake up, I'll see an email, and it's 7:30 in the morning. I don't necessarily need to respond then, but I want to, and I will. But I'm trying to put in sort of healthy boundaries to sort of learn to say, no, I don't need to respond to that right now. That can wait until I've had my breakfast, and that morning routine remains my time, and I'm not getting my brain engaged and active before I've actually had a coffee or a warm drink in the morning, before I've actually had a chance to eat, before I've even showered. Should be, well, I personally don't feel like I should be responding to emails when I'm not even dressed for the day. So it's about sort of setting those work-life boundaries and sort of really taking that time for me, so I'm set up in the best way I can to start my day to then address those emails.
Absolutely. That's a really great point, really interesting too. And I think for me it sort of became apparent and sort of listening to, the study sort of makes sense in the sense that, a while back where, I might sort of speak to someone who says, okay, well, you didn't reply to my email, but the email was sent at a ridiculous time, and the time frame between getting, for example, you might get an email at like in the early hours of the morning, and you only just switched on, and like, well, I haven't got a reply. Well, I don't monitor my emails 24/7 type thing, and I think for them, I thought at that point, obviously, sort of, once you log on there, like you says, I mean, I certainly felt that before, that kind of, guilt to reply. But then I sort of realized that, okay, unless I'm giving, a reply with my game head on, so to speak, then it's probably not the best thing anyway. But is there sort of any sort of tips on people who feel that need to, and I've been there before myself. It's like, well, I think I've got to reply, but then if I do that, the issue is then that keeps on happening. So is there any sort of tips for people sort of listening in, thinking, okay, if they do feel guilty not replying to someone, I know it depends on the nature of the email. There might be one they need to reply to that's an emergency, but say generally speaking, if it's not an emergency, it's something that could be dealt with at a more convenient time or a better time for everybody. Is there any thoughts on that people can sort of take on board with that?
Absolutely, Jimmy, and I completely resonate with what you're saying. I'm guilty of doing that too, but what I've been trying to do is kind of have those open communications with the sort of relevant team that you're working on, and set those boundaries, let them know that these are your working hours. Whilst you may send emails outside of those working hours, I won't be picking them up until this allotted work time, which then ends into sort of managing your time effectively and allocating time to respond to emails to do this task, and block out the time on your calendar so when your co-workers go to see if you've got availability or give you a quick Teams call, they'll see that your status is like you're busy. They can check your calendar to see what you're doing. And you can really prioritize your day around what's important at that time. And if you do need to reshift priorities, you've got that relationship to say, we've got these competing sort of deadlines, which one should be given priority, and really lean in on your team and your sort of team leader to say guidance on what you should be doing and when. And equally, learning to say no to things when you've got too much on, so you're not emailing at 6 a.m. in the morning till 9 a.m. And for a lot of people, workday hasn't even started yet. So I think it all fundamentally boils down to making sure that where possible you are having those meaningful discussions with your team to kind of set out what's expected and what you expect.
Absolutely, and that sort of resonates with me. I think they're sort of great tips, and that's certainly something that, when I was lecturing over when the sort of pandemic began and hours were all over the place in terms of like work and other things, and I realized that, to sort of embrace technology in the sense that that's where technology was a great thing, to sort of have a calendar, let people know when we're running certain sessions and certain tutorials, and that really, I think, helped ease the anxiety of the learners, I think, anyway, for the most part, at least if they felt they weren't being replied to at certain times, but also help to sort of get a more balanced work. So I think that's sort of a great insight, really. But I really want to thank you for coming on board the show. It's been really interesting. I'm sure our guests have found interesting as well. It's an interesting study, and I think you've offered some interesting sort of tips around helping ourselves to or at least be aware of where we could burn out. So thanks for coming on board the show, Henry. It's been great speaking to you. That was Henry Nelson Case. It was very kind of him to join us on the show to talk about a recent study around burnout and some tips how we could potentially avoid burnout.